Former U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney has been laid to rest in Washington, D.C., following his death on November 3, 2025, at the age of 84. His passing, caused by complications from pneumonia and long-standing heart disease, marked the end of one of the most influential and controversial careers in American politics. What has captivated the public in the days since his death is a haunting realization that in his final public address, delivered just weeks before his passing, Cheney seemed to know the end was near. His last words now sound like a man writing his own farewell to history. "We spend our lives trying to shape history," Cheney had said, "but history shapes us too. When the page finally turns, what matters is whether we stood firm when the storms came." At the time, few recognized how prophetic those words were. But when news of his death broke, they suddenly read like a quiet confession, a signal that Cheney, the master strategist of American power, had already accepted his final chapter. His funeral, held on November 20th at the Washington National Cathedral, brought together presidents, generals, and foreign dignitaries to honor a man who shaped nearly half a century of U.S. policy. It was a solemn farewell to a leader who had commanded both loyalty and controversy in equal measure. Born Richard Bruce Cheney on January 30, 1941, in Lincoln, Nebraska, he grew up in Casper, Wyoming, a quiet oil town far removed from the marble corridors of Washington. His father worked for the Department of Agriculture, and his mother was once a star softball player, a small-town upbringing that shaped his no-nonsense view of the world. After brief years at Yale, where he admitted he spent more time drinking beer than studying, Cheney returned to Wyoming and earned degrees in political science. 2 arrests for drunk driving in his youth became a turning point, the moment he decided to discipline himself and devote his life to public service. By 1968, Cheney was working on Capitol Hill, first as an aide to Representative William Steiger. His intellect and loyalty caught attention quickly. When President Gerald Ford elevated Donald Rumsfeld to Secretary of Defense, Cheney was appointed to replace him as White House Chief of Staff. At 34, he was one of the youngest men ever to hold the role, and one of the sharpest. After Ford's defeat in 1976, Cheney returned to Wyoming, ran for Congress, and won. For 10 years, he built a reputation as a pragmatic conservative with deep understanding of defense and governance. When President George H.W. Bush named him Secretary of Defense in 1989, Cheney's national prominence soared. He oversaw Operation Desert Storm, the swift and decisive campaign that pushed Iraqi forces out of Kuwait. His calm during the Gulf War earned him respect across party lines. For a time, many believed he would seek the presidency himself. Instead, fate placed him on a different path, one that would make him both a symbol of American strength and a lightning rod for its moral debates. In 2000, George W. Bush asked Cheney to lead his vice presidential search team, but after weeks of consideration, Bush realized that the best running mate was the man conducting the search. Cheney accepted, and on January 20, 2001, he was sworn in as the 46th Vice President of the United States. 8 months later came September 11, 2001, the day that defined his vice presidency and transformed global politics. As America watched in horror, Cheney was rushed to a secure bunker under the White House. There, as chaos unfolded, he assumed command of the government's emergency response. In the hours and days that followed, his decisiveness became legendary. But so did the secrecy and power he wielded. He pushed for sweeping counterterrorism measures, mass surveillance, enhanced interrogation, and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Cheney believed America's safety required absolute vigilance, even at the cost of controversy. "We must work the dark side," he famously said, "if we are going to spend time preventing another attack." To supporters, he was the unyielding guardian of the nation. To critics, he was the architect of forever wars. When weapons of mass destruction were never found in Iraq, public anger erupted. Cheney refused to back down. An extraordinary attack demanded an extraordinary response, he argued. But over time, the wars he championed grew unpopular, and his approval plummeted. Still, Cheney never sought popularity. only results. "I'd rather be right than popular," he once said, and he lived by it. Years later, as America's politics shifted toward populism, even Cheney's own party began to change. The rise of Donald Trump marked the end of the neoconservative era Cheney represented. Yet rather than adapt, Cheney opposed Trump fiercely. In 2024, he made headlines by declaring he would vote for Democrat Kamala Harris rather than support Trump's return to power, calling him the greatest threat to the republic in American history. Trump responded with fury, labeling Cheney an irrelevant rhino. But to many Americans, Cheney's stance symbolized something rare: principle over party. Despite political storms, Cheney's private life remained grounded. His wife, Lynn Cheney, stood by him through every trial, from political battles to heart surgeries. He survived 5 heart attacks, multiple bypasses, and even a heart transplant in 2012. His daughter, Liz Cheney, followed in his footsteps, serving in Congress before breaking with her party over Trump and the Capitol riot. Through it all, Cheney remained loyal to family and conviction alike. As President Bush once said, "Dick's love for America was second only to his love for his family." When the news of his death came, reactions were as divided as the man himself. Condoleezza Rice called him patriotic to his core. House Speaker Mike Johnson said, "We give honor where honor is due, and Dick Cheney's service deserves that honor." But critics, especially veterans of the Iraq War, were blunt. Some called him the architect of unnecessary bloodshed. From Baghdad, Iraqi writer Sinan Antoon said, "His legacy is chaos and destruction." Yet, even his harshest critics admitted that Cheney's power and intellect were unmatched. He reshaped the vice presidency, transforming it from a ceremonial position into what many called a deputy presidency. He was present in every major decision, sometimes more influential than the president himself. At his funeral on November 20th, the Washington National Cathedral stood filled with leaders, family, and rivals alike. Former presidents sat side by side in the front row. The air was heavy with history and contradiction. When George W. Bush rose to speak, he said simply, "He was the man I needed beside me when the world was falling apart, steady, loyal, fearless." Condoleezza Rice followed. "He taught me that leadership isn't about comfort. It's about courage." Then came Liz Cheney, speaking through tears. "My father believed in standing alone if it meant standing for what's right. He never asked the world to understand him, only to judge him fairly." As the ceremony ended, a recording of Cheney's final speech played softly through the cathedral. His voice echoed through the arches. "When the heart finally quiets, it's not the titles that endure, it's the choices. If I've done anything worth remembering, let it be that I never stopped defending this country." It was as if he had written his own eulogy and left it behind for the nation to hear. Outside, the gray skies hung still as the motorcade moved through Washington. The flags fluttered low. The streets that had once echoed with Cheney's power now carried only the soft hum of farewell. For some, it was a moment of mourning. For others, a reckoning. Because to remember Dick Cheney is to remember an era of American confidence and consequence. A time when decisions were made in shadowed rooms, and the world was reshaped by conviction. In the weeks after the funeral, his final words became a topic of fascination. Reporters and historians revisited the speech, calling it a coded goodbye. Sources close to Cheney confirmed that he had known his health was failing. His heart, they said, was too weak for another winter. He wanted to go on his own terms, a longtime aide revealed. He didn't want pity. He wanted to close his story the way he lived it, controlled, quiet, and deliberate. And so he did. Cheney's final speech, now seen as his farewell, captured the essence of the man. Proud, resolute, and unflinching in the face of mortality. "History will judge," he said, "not the noise, but the endurance." Those were his last public words. In the end, Dick Cheney's life was not one of simplicity, but of contradictions. He was both statesman and strategist, protector and provocateur, patriot and polarizer. He changed the way America fought, the way it governed, and the way it saw power itself. His era is over, but his shadow, long, sharp, and complex, will remain. As the final bell tolled at the cathedral, and as his casket disappeared beneath the gray November sky, one truth lingered. Dick Cheney did not wait for history to write his ending. He wrote it himself. That was the final revelation. His final speech wasn't merely about policy, it was about farewell. A farewell from a man who, even at the edge of life, never surrendered control.